Good evening. Welcome back to the 1873 TV, where we are looking at Zimbabwe once again. What is at stake and what is to come, and more importantly, this issue of change. Whose obligation is it to deliver it? We all often talk of change without the actual change makers. Good evening, Rowan Matsamba. Good evening, Brian Malon Kaswa. Welcome. For those who were not on the earlier session, this session is delivered to allow for a free exchange. We have come so far. I think when you look at Zimbabwe, 37 plus years old, as a country, it must have come of age. Any history of 37 years is compelled to produce experiences. So when we look back at 1980, what do you think was occupying the minds of the people who celebrated independence? What was the promise? So this is where we are. I think technology allows us to go back and relive through the words of the people who lived at the time. What was the mood like? What were the expectations like? And if you were alive then and you looked forward, what do you think would have been your own worldview? Welcome, Livingstone, Flexus Masango. So we have really no choice but to go back where it all started. What were the expectations? And I think it was Gerald Goliath, what happened with Shabani Mashaba Mines. I think we'll go into that. But for now, we just want to have a journey into the past and try to imagine the Zimbabwe, the other people, which is just a flashback, just as a precursor. Then we can just listen.
Mr. Mugabe, and I'm expecting
give people food, houses, farms, money, and everything they want.
What's Mr. Mugabe going to do for you?
Employment for my husband, betterment for my husband, schools, clinics, peace. I think that's the things that I want.
What will you do if Mr. Mugabe doesn't give you these things?
I don't expect it. I don't want to think about it. I'm sure he won't disappoint us. I'm sure of it.
Want a good and free country to live in.
And what else?
Jobs, good houses, better pay, and things like that.
I'm very happy about the victory of Mr. Mugabe, and I'm expecting big changes, such as people in these quarters will be removed to good houses, then the jobs will be having equal jobs, equal money, and everything like that. There will be no racial discrimination between people.
How will you feel if Mr. Mugabe fails to bring these changes?
Well, that will leave it to the people.
I'd like to see if people are as jubilant this time next year.
Feel sick.
That's all I can say.
Are you going to stay in Rhodesia?
I don't think so.
Where will you go?
I go to Britain, in spite of the weather.
A little worried. I'm hopeful that this will sort of stop the war. If it stops the war, then I'll live under any conditions, quite honestly. The war has been dreadful. I lost my husband. I have 3 children to support. I am worried because if he should nationalize, as has been said, I stand to lose everything.
No, actually, I'm not too happy about it at all. Because, you know, he's been responsible. You know, his men have been responsible for lots of atrocities, you know, in this country. And also, he is a communist.
Well, I am frightened because I feel we've lost the war. We've been fighting for it, and all the things that everybody has fought for has gone. We've lost it.
But haven't you got any brains in your head to know what you've done?
How do you feel about Mr. Mugabe's victory?
I think it stinks, and the British stink with it because you just given a victory to bloody Russia, you idiot.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Tembo.
Yeah, Magadiko, I'm well, I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine.
Just a number.
And you had the video.
Yeah, I heard the video. It kind of brings me back to the 80s.
80s, that's where it all began.
Yeah.
And now we are in 2017, 37 years later.
Correct.
As you look back and you imagine what it was like, what the expectations were, what is your take on the journey traveled?
It's very exciting. It's a tech that brings joy and tears at the same time. It has mixed feelings in the sense that when independence was came by in 1981, there was a lot of hope, and the economy was very strong, to a point where I think that our dollar was more stronger than the US dollar. Certainly, from the lowest levels of life in Zimbabwe, everybody had their basic needs met generally. And looking over time, definitely there was a revolvement of empowering the black majority Zimbabweans, in which some of us were beneficiary to those things, to develop our own industry, became entrepreneurs in the country. However, things spiraled beyond that level, in which you became one of them as well, when you came in to be a big player in our country, in the economy of our nation. Somehow the whole ballgame changed, and looks like what we had began to disappear. And hence, today we are at over 90% unemployment, I hear, so because I'm now in the United States. So I'm hearing information that definitely on the ground, and those that I'm connected to, things are not too good.
Okay, I think when we look at a country and we look at the direction that it may take, we often have the tendency of associating the movement with the actions and choices of certain individuals. One of them automatically becomes the president, because people do think there should be a connection between this individual and the general direction and welfare of a country. Do you think that that assumption is justified?
It's justified to a certain extent. Having been in the United States, now I realize the institutions, the power of institutions in the United States, and the power of the political voice in the United States. I'll give you an example. That when the elections were going on here in this country between Clinton and Trump, the movement of money on the money market was very evident of the whoever was supposed to be the, the person that they thought would be the president. So the day that they were voting, as Trump was winning, the stock market was going down. Therefore, from you knowing very well, having been exposed in the business long enough, you understand that the political aspect of the economy or any country is kind of viewed as the highest risk, because it is from the political view that your policies are being made. Therefore, I would not totally, depending on the nature of our governance, whether to look at how strong our institutions are. Here, like in the United States, for instance, the financial system, the banking system, is independent from the political system.
Okay.
The governor is non-political. They know when to fuel money in the economy and when to withhold money from the economy. So they control the economy to a certain extent in terms of interest rates. So in our nation, that economy and politics are buggled together. So hence, you cannot divorce now our leadership from our economy in terms of how it is today. So the blame goes on them because of the nature of our institution.
Okay, I think earlier on we were talking about this idea of igniting, inspiring people to be active citizens. When you look at the past 37 years in Zimbabwe, people generally have become disconnected, disinterested. And people, whether they're in the diaspora, they tend to look at active citizenship in the abstract. And people are connected on social media, but what you have in terms of outcome, it becomes like a chatter room where people talk and talk without any direction as to what kind of issues actually could ignite people to think, reflect. If you look at the United States, Trump's campaign was centered around small ideas. It is actually about America, whether America is where it should be. If not, how do we bring it back to where it should be? And from that simple conversation, there can be so many scenarios that can arise and did arise. Some people were scared of the future. Some people, this campaign spoke to their aspirations. If you look at Zimbabwe today, the narrative, the aspirations, the expectations, the alignment of the idea of where Zimbabwe should be and what people need to do to get there, it seems so far apart. What do you think is missing and could be added to possibly ignite people? And I see Tendai Muri says, Mapera Mdara. I think Mapera says Zimbabwe. And then Christina Franklin, I say, blessings, pastor.
Yeah.
I guess there are too many pastors.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically, I think that your question can be looked at from various perspectives, Vamto. When I look at the perspective where you're coming from and the campaign that Donald Trump put up in the United States, basically it was more focused on his background as well. He has done extremely well in terms of he's putting together his own institution and proved that America can give you the chance, to become what you are meant to be in terms of its in terms of its environment, to be able to do business in this country. So his perspective is America first. And with that business mindset is what the concern of everybody in the United States looks at, in terms of no matter who you are and whether you're Republican or Democrat, the first thing they look at is, how is this person going to sustain our economy? That to them, the bread and butter issues are primary. You remember when Obama was coming in, there was so much rumor that the country was going down the valley. And there was some hope that was ignited when he came in. And they worked around the whole thing with the institutions around this country, financial institutions, the banking system, insurance, whoever is a player in this country, with the voice, with the political voice that was strong. So I think that the fear is that, in my opinion, is that when people look at age as well, that is working against our own head of state, he is the one driving the ship. So if you are to invest, you invest with the mindset of longevity in order for you to make your return. So on the basis of that, you find that there is a restraint to investors, because if he's not in the picture, and I'm not saying he should be out of the picture sooner, but if he's not in the picture, then policy could be affected and changed, and that becomes a high risk for any form of investment. So there has to be, I think that more than the president, there has to be more than other players that are empowered to do what they should do in order to inject that energy within our economy. So what I'm trying to say is that everything is so centered on the president in our system. In America, it's not. It's
is it centered, or is it ignorance that creates this center of gravity?
It could be both. It could be ignorance, but ignorance comes because of leadership, right? Because the leadership is responsible to put out and to empower its people. They always say you can go as far as your leader goes. So in my view, like I said again, I'm a beneficiary of the system in the sense that I went through an apprenticeship program, did production engineering, ended up having a company in Zimbabwe producing parts of various aspects. In fact, I dealt partly with your company, your company that you were owning without your knowledge, but I did that because I was making parts for your company. But because you were the CEO, you had no idea of what was going on to the small guy who was buying parts for you. So what I'm trying to say is
that is one of the problems we face, because people assume, if I told you that I was never a CEO, would you believe it? If I told you that I was never a CEO, would you believe it? Mr. Tembo? Mr. Tembo? Hello? Okay. We seem to have a connection problem with Mr. Tembo. Welcome, Mr. Tichafa. Matla Ngove Tichafa. Welcome, Kuzanai Chakanza. Welcome, Steve Rengo. Welcome, Neliswe. Welcome, Buse. Okay, the sound, I hear the sound is low. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? The sound is low, it's raining. Perhaps that is where the problem is. What I'll do is I will reconnect. Hello? Can you hear me? The visual is good, but the sound is not coming out. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello? Okay, hello, Steve, can you hear me? It's still low. Okay. Yeah, I think Mr. Tichafa, we're talking about, or it's just low. Hello? Can you hear me now? Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, no, it's low. The same, yeah, I think people can hear. Tichafa, he just joined. What is the subject? The subject is really about, it's about a conversation on Zimbabwe. I think it's a continuing conversation that started earlier on. What we are looking about at is the change that we all think must take place without necessarily applying our minds as to how best that change can be delivered. So we are talking about change. We are talking about who bears the onus to deliver it and what would ignite it or what would best ignite it. And then this is an open conversation where you can add your voice. I see Thomas Gift Munyafe, he says, political discord in a country is a recipe for disaster, and economic fundamentals will only be found in theory and not practice of the nation. And Zimbabwe, Pete Ebos, Zimbabwe is no alternative opposition leader. All opposition leaders are not focused. Everyone just seems power hungry. I think earlier on, Peter, welcome back. Trevor, welcome. Earlier on, I think we were talking about the man called George Washington, who became the first American president. Although there were other presidents before, the formal former president of the US. This is what he had to say. I walk on untrodden ground. And this is instructive because most of us expect a president to walk on trodden ground, that the president ought to know and must know the direction of where the country and its people should go, and that the president ought to have better wisdom than the average person. How true is this? And Peter was talking about a president and the expectations of it. So in 1980, as the audio we played demonstrates, people definitely were looking forward to a Zimbabwe of promise. What was the promise? Independence itself, to the extent it was a contested idea. There were two views. One view saying, don't give rights to vote to everybody. Limit the right so that only those who have property and who are qualified to vote because of education, enlightenment, this was the view. The effect of independence was to open the civil rights to everybody, so that everybody, whether you're educated, you are not, whatever your station of life is, as long as you are, you have qualified in terms of age, and you qualify in terms of residence, you can vote. Peter Temple says dialogue is necessary to address issues, and somehow will navigate our reviving the economy of our nation. Until we dialogue, we cannot act. Dialogue, I think, Mr. Temple, you'd agree, dialogue itself assumes that we know what to dialogue about. What is the idea that we need to dialogue for and on about? I think in terms of statecraft, the craft of administering a government, there is no shared view. I think most of the people who are watching would agree that without a shared view of what government is and what government can do and what citizens can do, a common idea of what power is and what it is not, then it's very difficult to have a dialogue without understanding. If you look at just the state power and public office bearers, how many people want to be president without actually knowing what a president does? For a country like Zimbabwe, the only reference for the post-colonial state is one man. So anyone who wants to be president is like moving into uncharted waters. There's only one person who can legitimately claim to have been in that office. If it's the first office, it is the only one individual. What if the individual also doesn't know what the true purpose and functions of that office is or ought to be? Pete Ebo says, honestly, our country has no direction. I don't think, Pete, you mean the country ought to have a direction. The country itself is neutral, but people are not. People are aspirational. They want to be somebody. They want to live a healthy life. That is where the life is. That is, human beings by nature are selfish, random, egotistic, and irrational sometimes. They are interest-based, and they are not necessarily driven by the bigger and collective good. And you then say we suffer. You are including others without their knowledge and consent from short policies that are reactive and not proactive. You may discover that you are not part of the mind that informs the policies. Yet it's so easy for us to then include ourselves into the minds of those who are in government, who also may be lonely, who also may not even know what the role of government is and what people in government should be good at and what is their purpose. I think democracy is flawed in Zimbabwe as an uneducated voters who are given food and bribes vote for the wrong leaders each time while the educated suffer. Would you want a country where the vote was only limited to the educated people? Is that the promise of independence? If it is the promise of independence, then really, do you think it's necessary for us to limit the power, the inherent power that is in you to be able to make choices? Do you think choices about who should be in government or not should be limited only to the enlightened people or people with property and people with vested interest? Or the right to choose ought to be universal, indivisible? Those are the questions that you need to resolve. Steve Rengo, you say, I'm listening via Zimbabwe today. Good visual, sound very good. And Tichava says, at the moment, I would suggest two ways of kickstarting our economy. Let's make Zimbabwe. Who is let's make Zimbabwe? In the let's make, who are you including and who are you excluding, Tichafa? Let's make Zimbabwe conducive for foreign capital and channel it into in production sectors. Do you think capital ought to be limited, or that there should be a higher center where people in government are automatically bestowed with the wisdom to make investments? Who would want a government where people in government are smarter than the people who choose them? Would you feel that is the proper use of your vote, that after you vote, the person you have voted for or against automatically assumes the powers that yourself you can't have? What kind of ecosystem do you think is best suited to attract investment? If money is a visitor, how best can you make this idea of money so democratized that people who want it, they know how to get it? Do you think it's the role of government officials, a product of a vote, to be able to know better and act better in terms of your own money that you have earned through private contracts, private voluntary arrangements? Then let's boost efficient domestic resource mobilization. When you say let's, do you think it's the proper role of government or government officials or people who act in the name of government to be able to be bestowed with the wisdom to decide how money itself, if we think of it, what is it? What is its role in the affairs of men? Is money an end game in itself, or money is actually a consequence of something, or ought to be a consequence of some value that is exchanged between parties, and money is just one characterization of the value in it? What is the paradigm that informs policies in Zimbabwe today or since independence about money, about value? Is Zimbabwe a value-centric ecosystem, or actually is an affinity-centric ecosystem. So if you don't apply yourself, you may be changing from one ecosystem to a worse ecosystem unless you apply your mind correctly. Tatenda Nyamadzao says, government officials responsible for that. I mean proper government people, quite a G40. Tatenda, give us the mechanism in which you'll be able to discriminate and exclude those you think should not be in government. Do you think voting elections provide a better mechanism for us to be able to pick the few among the many to then preside in government? And if so, what characteristics do you want the elections to have? What attributes do you want the elections to have? Do you want elections to be able to discriminate, and you want people to write exams so that when they go into government, they actually think differently just because you have elected them? If I'm a fool today and you elected me tomorrow, do you really expect the elections to alter my foolishness, or I remain a fool before and after? Should elected office bearers actually be expected to be superhuman? If so, what would be the legal and moral basis of these people joining government? And then automatically we assume they are smart, and they ought to be smart. And smart about what? Because value itself does not require smartness. Imagine you go to a cash and carry without cash, and you're a genius. What ought to happen? Would you carry because of your genius outlook, genius worldview, or it should be value-centric, where you give up something to get something, and there's an exchange of value? So these are some of the things that, without focusing on the individual, because the tendency is, let's talk about the individual, and it is the individual that we ought to be focusing on. But what is the individual clothed with public power? Can one individual mind be capable of accommodating all the aspirations of the people in a country? Not every citizen can impact any decision in our country. Would you expect every citizen to be involved in the policy making? If so, how practical would it be? How would you be able to solicit the views of every citizen? And if so, would that be desirable? Would that be beneficial? Or you'd rather have a representative democracy where a few would be act in the representative capacity while you remain with your power outside the government? Then you state that our economic problems are as a result of political problems. What are political problems? And what would give problems a character, a label, that this problem is political, when actually the affairs of men are not limited to this politics or political silo? Then we have, so that the real solution will be to deal with the political issues, and these will solve the economic problems we are facing. Do you genuinely believe there is and there ought to be a connection between civic challenges and the economic challenges? How best can economic freedom be secured? If you believe that it can be secured through political manipulation, through political means, then let's deal with that. Let's deal with your worldview and your paradigm. There is no room for fair dialogue in Zimbabwe. I guess in any system, those who get into government, they also have their own friends and family. Those who don't will also be outside. So the reality that will manifest itself in the minds and actions of the people in government, it's a reality that is shaped and defined by individuals like you and me. There are people who lobby, there are people who influence, but not the universe, the universe of people who never have an opportunity of impacting on policy making. And Peter, you're in the United States. Even Trump brings his own children into the White House, brings son-in-law, daughter, the son, the intertwining. So if we look at the developed world and we are trying to learn, you also discover that there is no perfect system in the world. And in terms of consultation, people generally are disconnected. They are actually disengaged because they feel it's not their government. And most of the people are part of the system, but they operate outside it. They can't influence, even if they have ideas. Those ideas have contestation, and you have to sell your own idea. Whether there's a bad person in government, a good person in government, you are rest assured that those who are in government are human like you and me. They will have their own preferences. They will have the people they don't like everybody else. The question is, how do we minimize this animalistic nature of men? If we can do it, let's negotiate it. But you realize that no man, however smart, can ever be trusted with power, especially if it's borrowed power. Because the people who have access to it will never be the people who are intended for it. The people who get jobs will never be the best, because there is no way of establishing where the address is, where the best resides. It's so random, you don't even know who is who in the zoo. We need foreign investment, but as long as we have the same leaders. Again, when you look at George Washington, what did he say about himself? He was reluctant to be a leader because he knew the folly of leadership. That when you become a so-called leader, the expectations are high, that you ought to have a preferential right to think, and also you must have solutions resident in your mind. But people have never actually reflected on it, that a fool can always be a fool. When you elect a fool, and even if he stays 10 years in office, the people who have access to him may also be people he is generally comfortable with. And a fool will attract fools. A smart person, perhaps. I don't know. We don't have all the answers. But what we do know is that George Washington said, I walk on untrodden ground. That life itself is about walking on untrodden ground. Because if we knew what the next piece of ground offers, we all would be smarter. But life doesn't give us that benefit, that opportunity. But as long as we have same leaders who have inconsistent foreign policy, then we always go around in circles. You may find that those leaders, so-called leaders, are human beings like you who have been wrong, and if you are consistently wrong, you think what is wrong is right. Because the people who know what is right are silent. And if you are silent, you are not doing yourself a favor by assuming that the people in government have a better obligation to be able to deal with the problems that you confront. Tatenda Nyamadzao, every citizen, as long as they meet the criteria. If you have a criteria, then already you are excluding only a few years ago, 37 plus, there was a logic that actually blacks belong to a class of people eligible to be excluded because they have no relationship with this idea called government, because they are not taxpayers, they don't earn enough, they don't have property, they don't have interest to asset. Would you want to turn back the clock of history and say, today in 2017, those who don't meet the criteria, they belong to one class, those who meet the criteria, they belong to another class? And who is to administer that system where other people become excluded on account of past things? Because you may meet somebody today who looks poor, thinks poor, acts poor to you, only to meet him the next week being a different person altogether. Human beings by nature are capable of transforming themselves from nothing to something. If they have an environment that allows them to do so, the more you give power to people in government, the more you limit this creativity of men. Because the moment you think the person in government has got a better claim on wisdom, then you find yourself in trouble. You say traceable evidence, references, criminal records. Australia was built, some would say, initially by criminals, by people with bad references. America was also built by people who left one country to go to another country. If you were to say that criminals are condemned and that is the end of the story, is that the kind of civilization you want to see? If so, then spell it out and let's see where that will take us. Then you have a same leader in power for more than 10 years is an example of political problem we have in Zimbabwe. Yes, you got a problem, Pete, you are making a point, but the leader did not fly by helicopter from heaven or from another planet. The people who allowed that to happen are the people who also must look at themselves in the mirror. If you are suggesting that there was a political leader who came from a test tube and he was then delivered outside the public glare of people like you and me, then you have something going for you. Then you're saying something. This leads toward dictatorship and bad policies become cumulative. Yes, your silence, your acquiescence, and sometimes your consent allows people to think that they know you better. They make decisions for you. You go to a funeral, you go to a wedding, and you see these characters called politicians. Everyone wants to be around them. Yet, after that, they despise them. You go on Twitter, everybody wants to follow the political actors, even when they have nothing to share. Just the fact that I'm following so-and-so, they become celebrities with your power, and then you accept it. Then you say it's cumulative. What is cumulative is for you to be able to participate voluntarily or involuntarily by acquiescing, by actually being silent. How do we deal with those, Jennings Rukani, how do we deal with those we elected but now no longer want them? They are insulated and can't be offloaded. I think I can take you to what George Mason in 1776 said about these kind of characters, so that you just see that the problem you think is unique to Zimbabwe actually is not as unique as we think. So if you look at in May of 1776, George Mason penned what they call the Virginia Declaration of Rights. And it may be instructive to deal with that. The Article 3 says that government is and ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people. So one common benefit, not private benefit. Protection, not exposure. So we have now security of the very people who create that power. Of the people, nation, or community, of all the various modes and forms of government, that is best, which is capable of producing the greatest degree of happiness and safety, and is most effectually secured against the danger of maladministration. And this is instructive, what George Mason said. Whenever any government shall be found inadequate or contrary to these purposes, the purposes are common benefit, protection, and security. Not investment, not to allocate land, not to allocate minerals. A majority of the community hath an unadaptable, unalienable, and indefeasible right to reform, alter, or abolish it in such manner as shall be judged most conducive to the public will. If you know for certain that the government is no longer acting in that frame of common benefit, protection, and security, then you have a call up and a call to action. That it's already too late. No election can cure people who now think government belongs to them because they are in government. Then you have your work cut out for you. And all of the people who may call themselves Zimbabwean, and without understanding that even democracy itself requires a protection. It requires people to know what are the rights, what are not. Admire Masuka. The truth was said. Thank you guys, keep it up. Peter Temple, President Trump was questioned on matters concerning his business and how he was to move forward. The laws of the land address the way forward, and I believe through dialogue with knowledge of what to do, Zimbabwe can be a bread basket of Africa once more. Zimbabwe itself does not need to be a bread basket, but you have to be the bread. The bread is in you, the property is in you, the wealth is in you. Everything else that you need to live has already been created outside outside the ingenuity and creativity of men. In Zimbabwe, most of well-to-do business are connected to the ruling party. It's get into politics and get rich, but the US is the other way around. I don't know, because they assume, we often assume that the same people who are accusing of causing the Titanic to sink are also capable of enriching others or making others rich. That should only be an aberration. But for the whole country to assume that people in public office are responsible for what the universe holds in terms of business acumen, in terms of creativity, that would be a wrong approach to me. Because what kind of country would it be where you elect somebody automatically being associated with that person, whether foolish or smart, results in value being created? Yes, you can say it's a tender. Then how sustainable it is? Even money itself, it expires. Life itself, it also expires. One day I was young, today I'm older. And that's what life is. That's what we all have to go through. Adopting, T'Challa says, adopting an election college system of US is the way to go. Most people don't know the consequence of their decisions. For example, I am Zim rural residents. In Zim, rural residents constitute the majority. It's common knowledge. It's common knowledge that they have less education, so they generally have no clue of how economic development ought to be driven. Yeah, teacher, go back to this promise of independence. If your argument, if I hear it correctly, we know where the gravity is, we know where the majority are, and we know most of the people are outside the formal employment, because the independence has not created the job creating capacity that you require. Therefore, most people are unemployment, they are poor, they are at the bottom of the pile. That is known. Then what kind of system would you want to replace it? Should it be a merit-based system, a point system, where people go to an examiner and they say, you are now qualified? What kind of system do you want? Let's be honest. Let's have a conversation on it. Let's not assume that systems actually have legs, have eyes, have ears, that they will automatically mutate into what you want. Education. Do you trust all the educated people to take care of your interests? What if the educated are selfish? What if the educated are as human as you are? They discriminate against those who are not educated. They think what they know is the universe of what ought to be known. What if that is the consequence? What if doctors want to associate only with doctors? What if lawyers want to associate only with lawyers? What if the country is now reduced to qualified people, and when you need food, the qualified person is sleeping, and you need food to eat now? What is to be done? So education on its own, let's look at the journey of independence. The educated people, are they missing in action on what matters? Are they the same people who have left the country like all of us because we found ourselves marketable? Then automatically we assume those who remain behind are fools. And we are the ones now who have the monopoly of thinking that the solutions that are in our minds or the environment that we're exposed to where we live today should be and ought to be automatically the environment in a place like Zimbabwe. We need to be able to think outside the box. Aitai Makumbe says, Mr. Mwaori, you sound like you have a great perspective on things. Support people like me, and together we can accelerate the conscious awakening of our people. We can move them out of this culture of me, out of this culture of merely discussing issues, to a place where they can actually be able to fathom real changes. Yeah, it takes one person to be the active agent of change. It takes one person to talk to other people, to share perspectives, to shift the paradigms. Like what Martin Luther King said, the long arc of the moral universe. It bends, but it bends slowly. It's so far away you can't touch it. But each bend, whatever you do, can bend that arc towards where it should be, towards justice, towards prosperity, towards an environment that speaks to your aspirations. And the good thing in this discussion can go on without being censored, because most of us live in the diaspora. Yes, you are right. Let's use our voices for good. Let's build a new conversation. But let's not assume life was meant to be easy. Solutions were meant to be easy. That we can dream solutions, we can dream actions without ourselves constituting into a group of people with purpose. Just look at it. The people who left are now called colonialists. They left Europe or wherever they were with one-way ticket. They never left with a return ticket. They paid for their tickets. What gave them the confidence that the promise they sought would be found where they landed? They did land. And they found Africa the way most of the other places were. What is it that informed their actions not to build a tent, but to build a home, fully knowing that one day they will die and leave the home? How can people who left with nothing and built something in Africa not be able to provide an example for us that actually it's possible? And then Pete Ebos comes in again. Mdara, in Zimbabwe, you can never participate or voice an opinion without consequences. We have voices like Ivan Maware, who is still being persecuted for requesting service delivery. Yes, I'm saying is the majority can never be found in one person. How do we build communities that become the majority rather than one individual standing out, standing up? And we are not talking to each other to say what matters. What are the things that we found unacceptable? Let's document them. Let's share the experiences. Let's name and shame those people. Mawarire is one. He has given us a lot of material to be able to talk about. What is he saying? What are they saying? Where is the fault lines? Okay. Then we have voices like then Itai disappeared for his one-man protest. And we know that through elections, it's a non-starter. At the moment, the ZEC is not so much of an independent body as it claims to be. If we list all the problems and all the disadvantages, then there is no need even to imagine change. Look at the people in 1980. All they did was vote. They knew Muzorewa was there. They knew Ian Smith was there. But they still voted with their conscience because there was something about that election that ignited people, that took them out of their comfort zones and say, please, this is your government. The moment it becomes their government and you are afraid of it, then there is something wrong. And it won't be cured by yet another election. I don't think anyone can reform himself out of power. I don't think anyone sensible would dream about being a poor. But poverty, yes, visits everybody. So I think let's not try to imagine a Zimbabwe without people, without selfish people. It's not possible. Human beings by nature are a difficult breed, they're a difficult asset because they think. And they're not objects that you can leave here, find them tomorrow, they're waiting for you. Like a car, you park it here, unless somebody takes it away, you find it waiting for you. Human beings by nature are a problem because that's why we are human beings. That's why we're not animals with the power to think. That power is inherent in us. It's innate. It was given for free. Let's use it. And sometimes, you know you got the power. And if you have to vote, why make noise? Why bark like a dog when you can use your inherent power? Then I assure that we have been having these kinds of dialogue in Zimbabwe. The new cyber minister would have been on our case by now. It can be whatever it is, but there is no legitimacy of state power that is not founded in the acquiescence of the people who claim to be victims of the same system that they've created. The same vampire you create is the one that is going to bite you. The Steve Rengo says the colonialists did not come to Rhodesia for the benefit of the native population. Why would I leave Europe to be poor in Africa? Doesn't make sense. They didn't come here to be philanthropic or to be Mother Teresa or Salvation Army. They came precisely because they were looking for a greener pasture, like people who have left and who have gone to the distant shores, who are also black like me. They are going there in search of this power, which is called the human spirit. It takes you where you think you ought to be. Unless you are there, you are not happy. Even if we were to bring them from the diaspora in Zimbabwe, they will still not be happy. These are human beings, they are not objects. When they left, their example was not a sample. Yeah, I don't know, Steve. There is no one who moves from point A to point B unless you are seeking that which makes you a better person. If life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are rights of nature, then human beings by nature will always go to the ground where happiness is, where liberty is, where life is protected. Human beings are not that naive, they're not stupid. So there is no person called a Zimbabwean who is created to be stupid. We are all human beings and we all seek a better ground. Steve Rengo, then Zimbabwe is doomed to being down and out till their Mandela appears on the scene. This idea of Mandela himself never thought he was a messiah. He even said, I'm a sinner like you. Don't take me as if I was born to liberate you. No. Freedom is in you, and it can never be taken away. Even when he was in Robben Island, he never lost his mental faculty, the free will, the power to do things. That remained innate in him. I can't put an X on a ballot paper, then lose my faculties by doing so. I remain who I am. So there is no Mandela coming. Every one of us is a Mandela. Steve, on point, Calvin Mawarire. Fine. Then I have on the other network, Oscar Tendere says, expectation will always yield disappointment. It's high time as an individual, I'm realizing no one was ever created to become a Superman to my problems. Yet, most of us, we have a misconception toward the assumed duties of these state actors, called a president here, a vice president there. We forget that he is also a human being who is prone to making mistakes like you and me, who, like George Washington, who said, I walk on an untrodden ground. That ground is never troubled. Life itself does not give you a second that you have not consumed, that you know of. You can die in second. So the sooner I realized this as an individual, that no one is my interest except the man in the mirror, that I am the answer, the closer I am to solving the challenges I face. Hashtag active citizenship. Citizen toward the change I desire. Ronald in Australia, welcome. How is it down and under? Then Bless Dube, new blood from the diaspora. Why? Because in building infrastructure, we are more exposed to developed infrastructure and institutional fairness. Please, when you are in the diaspora, breathe the air where you are. Drink the water where you are. When you come to Zimbabwe, please come with the humility that keeps other people there. Don't create a new apartheid where you say those who have been outside the borders of Zimbabwe have a superior wisdom. They are exposed to this. It's not about exposure. It's about the hard work that you have to exert It's about putting together systems that allow even the weakest person to become the strongest person. If that process or factory of transforming a nobody to a somebody had to be intermediated through government departments, then nobody will want to leave government. Then people will become in government, not for the common good, not for the protection of the very rights that we're talking about. So blessed do it. Be in Rome, do what the Romans do. In Zimbabwe, come back with the humility to say, I'm part of the solution. Be a problem-solving contributor rather than a problem-solving contributor who then becomes diaspora. What is diaspora? Is that a human being? Is that a new identity that we have given for ourselves so that we appear to be different? Or we are all the same? If we are all the same, let's celebrate our humanity in the things that we wish to be done. Okay, Jackson Zero says there's no volume. You can also go to Zimbabwe today. There is a better volume, I think, for now. I'm not sure what is happening. But you can get the same audio, the same interest. I think there is a lot. Steve migrated from this site to another site. So if you can't hear me on this site, you can also, and Steve Rengo is saying the 1873 FM is the low volume, but Zimbabwe today is better volume. So there is a suggestion there, Jackson. Then Peter Temple Smith vowed that blacks could never rule Rhodesia in 1,000 years, but change came anyway. The era is in no different when we have challenges. The status must change for the good for the people. I think you will agree, Peter, that no status will change because you want it to change. It will change because you have decided to change yourself. So I don't think that even Smith had an idea of what was before him. But people were ignited, people left school. People were excited to be part of this story called change politics. They became engaged. And if you cannot find yourself being excited, interested, ignited, then it means Zimbabwe will not change. You have to start now being ignited to see yourself as the face of change. Then change will come. How do institutions with integrity become created? There is no institution that has a life independent of the people who create it. If people have no integrity, they will have institutions who reflect that characteristic, that personality, that character. It will not be mistakable. Is it possible for Zimbabweans to agree on such modalities? No, it's a negotiation. So when you are on air, please add your voice. And the people who are watching, there are people who say we have been prevented from talking. If you want to be added to it, tell us so that we hear your voice. It doesn't become my voice only. I'm just assisting in answering the questions, but I don't have the universe of answers. Because the answers must be in you. What is the next step? And all we can do, ignite. If you can't find it, and if already you are saying things can't be done, they will not be done. So how do we effect change when we want to change the system? Not from within, i.e. from the diaspora. The fear factor, or to be more precise, the induced fear. Hello? How do we effect change when we want to change the system? So there is no address for change. We live in a borderless world. Right now we are communicating. I'm just at my place. and talking, but I don't know who I'm talking to. Those who have identified themselves, I know them. Those who choose not to identify themselves, I'll never know them. And that's the beauty of it. We are so connected, but we can set up a community today in the virtual world to say these are hashtag change the world, like Oscar was talking about. Money is required. There are people in Zimbabwe who are barely surviving. Imagine you put your money, $1 in a bank, and to get it out, you have to pay someone 60%. How would you survive? You have created value worth $100. Then you end up with $40 of the value. Just because somebody says the money you have earned belongs to the nation. Then you accept that kind of nonsense. This is your money. The government has no business. The Reserve Bank has no money of its own. That will then mutate into your money. You put money in good faith. You can convert the money into a car. They won't take the car. But if you put money in the bank, then they say it's in the national interest that you must not take it out. And it's your money. What kind of system would that be that inspires you to say, yes, money itself becomes a business where somebody gets 60% of value they didn't earn just to give you what is yours. And you end up with less of what you are entitled to. This is 37 plus years after independence. And then you say, I'm in the diaspora. The 60 cents, I have nothing to do with it. The fear factor, right? We are already paying for this tyranny. This is called commercial tyranny, commercial violence. It's worse than the physical violence. Because imagine you have worked so hard so that you can put your kids to school. Then you end up with 60 cents missing in action. Because the system created by people who derive their legitimacy from you, from your acquiescence, from your silence, from your consent, then they become to use that. They create another reality called state money, which is your money. And you say things are fine. The fear factor, or to be more precise, the induced fear, right syndrome from the times of pre-independence, has made us more and more docile. Imagine we all put $100 for change. What impact would we make? People, they go to vote. Because right now, state resource, the power of incumbents, whoever is in government, has got the resources to be able to bus people, track people, tractor them even, wheelbarrow them to a station to register. Those with no resources, they end up with nothing. The donors are only prepared to pay for pop stars, the people they can talk to. They can even think they can manipulate. So you have the power inherent in you. The less we talk, and imagine we just send money to make a difference, then how many people, and we know that this is only a timed suffering. Because imagine you are losing 60% today. Very soon it will be 1 for 1. You deposit $100 in the bank. Then you have to pay 50 to remain with 50. Do you think that kind of system is what independence was meant to deliver? Everybody knows about it. The so-called Watengesi will always fall victims of Watengesi doctrine of the ruling party. And if you decide to be smart, to be an armchair revolutionary, where we can talk, we can talk. If we form ourselves into a community, we'll find a way. Those who need dollars, they use the dollars. They buy chrome, they sell chrome. Those who need rands, you release rands. Because you already know that the system is dysfunctional. 37 years after independence, your cash is no longer your cash. Cash is property. Cash is value in motion. Cash doesn't come from a transmission mechanism. It's not a sexually transmitted disease. Then could the Ministry of Cyber Security, could the recent Ministry of Cyber Security respond to perceived fear by the government to the propensity of forces of change being propagated in that space? That's Butle Murugani. How can the forces of change remain alive within the borders in view of anticipated challenges brought by this ministry? There is no ministry that can supersede the human spirit. There's nothing. Nobody invested the diaspora to leave the country. They left with nothing, arrived with nothing. But today, some of them have a story to tell. Some of them have good stories to tell. They don't have a government there. They don't have a president there, wherever they are. But they're just trying to make ends meet the best way they know. And Chafa says, good night, sir, benefited a lot. Thank you. And so the Minister of Cyber, yes, it's a response. There is an idea that if we can control people's opinions, then we are getting closer to where we should be. There is a mindset, which means everybody who doesn't see the world the same way you see it actually is a rebel and ought to be controlled. There is a view, there's a mindset which says government belongs to certain people, and government, the people who serve in government, ought to be so and so. You ought to be experienced. Take yourself back to 1980 and talk to President Mugabe. Interviews for journalists there. What was it like in 1980 with no experience? Who told you how to make decisions in government? He would tell you his fears, and he had no one to turn to. And perhaps that has been his story for 37 years. Nobody to talk to, what it means to be a president, what it means to make choices. And you have no interest in the choices that you are making. We all talk of leadership as if we know what it means. What if the so-called leader does not have the wisdom that we normally credit them for? Then how can the forces of change remain alive within the borders? Yes, you are the change. As long as you are alive, you are a change maker. It's what you do with your time that would then define what changes and what it is not. So you need to be able to be the change wherever you are. So don't underestimate your power of causation and your power of agency. You are the person who can make the choice to make Zimbabwe the kind of environment that you want. You don't have to be in Zimbabwe. All these colonies, all these, when you look at Rhodesia, Rhodes was never there. Rhodes was in the diaspora. Rhodes was a prime minister in the Cape. Rhodes lived in Cape Town. So he never lived in Rhodesia. So you don't have to be geographically in the country to impact on change. You are the change. So I don't think you can control the human spirit. No cyber security ministry will ever do what humans cannot do themselves. Even if you're husband and wife, I don't think you have a capacity to control what your wife is thinking. Even your children, I don't think you have a capacity to control them, even to anticipate what they're thinking. So how would you control this cyber when its existence actually is the first democratic experiment? That all this social media is really about opening these gates, these barriers, these boom gates. It is about making people free. Because information is power, knowledge is power. You have it, share it, then it becomes powerful. But how many want just to listen to other people talk? So I hope the people who are silent will be able to see the fall in their silence. So we are winding up as I promised, but are there any questions, comments that ought to be addressed? That's your hour to express. I think I've tried to answer some of the questions raised to the best of my ability. If I have not, forgive me, because I don't pretend to have all the answers. Thank you. Steve says good insight, Mr. M. And how do you expect to effect change when not on the ground? Yeah, I've said that you don't really need to be on the ground. Technology has allowed us to impact on human life. The disruptive technology has given a new address for change. That change does not require physical proximity. I could be in Hong Kong and not know what is happening in my neighborhood. So physical presence itself does not effect change. Right now, over this just over an hour, we have been able to reach, I think just on Zimbabwe today, 1,500 people. Imagine I had to reach 1111 in retail, this message. Right now, as we are talking, is being recorded. So everything that we are doing, there is a record of it. There's an archive of it. You can take the link, share it. You never know who it may inspire, who it may ignite. So Jesus is not alive. Prophet Muhammad is not alive. But they still have impact on the living. And the people who say, I'm a born again Christian. How do they become born again? Then he says, I'm in at par. I'm not sure what par means, but perhaps Joe, you can explain what you mean by par. Then Hansi, ndeye kubata macons. So how does it work? I'm not sure. Is it the ministry, Martin Madzire? Steve Rengo says, excellent insight and perspective. Then Martin Madzire says, how does it work? What is it that Martin, you can just remind me. Then Steve, your conversation is an example of hope. You speak of hope, and that is spreading. So Steve, thank you. At par means equal footing. You never have equal footing in life. Let's accept that. But within the unequal footing, there is a story there. Because would it be desirable? I guess the idea is the cyber security, that there is a whole world that people who are obsessed with control mentality, that they don't seem to be able to understand. This is called the cyber world. So it's like, I want to put a government in the cyberspace so that I can control people who operate in it. So this is the kind of thing that you elect somebody today. The next minute he wants to control you. Then come back again after 5 years to say, vote for me. What about the current level of cynicism among Zimbabweans who sound very critical to all that avail themselves for the context of public office? How can this cynicism be bridged to create a more cohesive force? Bule, Again, it's conversation like this that open the mind, because ignorance and prejudice are very good friends. Because generally people who are ignorant tend to be fearful because they don't know. Because even if I'm going to demonstrate and I say this flag, I have to know somehow what I'm demonstrating for or against. Sometimes it's not good to be against because you must stand for something. What do you stand for? If you stand for property rights, then you must be able to assert those property rights. If cash is property, now somebody says, I give you bond notes, you give me US dollars, and I give you bond notes. At that point alone, what do we do to generate a community to show that this kind of behavior is theft in motion, that you are stealing people's money in the name of protecting them? From what? From imperialism. What is imperialism? What is capitalism? Have you ever seen the face of it? But when you have money, whatever system you talk of, like Deng Xiaoping said, whether the cat is black, white, as long as it catches mice, who cares? So, Joe, it's very difficult to imagine equal footing. We are created equal, yes, but there are people who may have, where I'm weak, I have to find the best way to communicate my message. And technology has allowed us to broadcast, to circumvent the editors who used to edit and exclude those people who became popular, who became powerful because they were scribes. Now you are a scribe. You are also a broadcaster. So let's use our broadcasting right to be able to break those chains, the silos that would create one person think they're in comfort, not knowing tomorrow. The same problem will visit them. Yesterday they say it's Mawere. Today it's them. They don't know how to react. When Hitler started, they thought it was only reserved for gypsies. Even Jews were laughing, drinking coffee and thinking they're secure, not knowing things can get off track any minute, because where you have no sense, where you have no interest, anything is possible. All you need is to convince one man. And human beings are very easy to manage. Even kids can manage them. Zimbabweans, Steve Rengo, Zimbabweans would defeat doubt. Optimism defeats pessimism. Technology has given us opportunities, and the government thought police. Whatever police you put in, imagine somebody leaving Chad and you say, where are you going? I'm going to Europe. Do you have the money? No. Then you see him in Libya. You see him catch a boat. You see him perish crossing the Mediterranean. What kind of spirit would take you from a place you call home and then move step by step, going up the chain to where you think you ought to be? The human spirit is more powerful than anything. It cannot be caged. It cannot be managed. So we are just talking about things that human beings may try to do, thinking that they are smarter than what actually the power they possess can give them. So it's not that easy to control people. And that will never happen anyway. The jails will be full by today. Imagine you had to listen to all the conversations that take place in the world. Yes, some will be targeted. Some will be made sacrificial lambs. That's why when you go to Rivonia trial, there are few. Even Zimbabwe, there were few. But the rest are unknown. Nobody knows what they were doing, but they did a lot to make the change possible. But their names remain outside the names that we know and associate and credit for freedom. But wherever you are, whatever you do, whether it's by talk that changes somebody, even just with $100 to say, guys, let's not talk, let's do something about it, then it means you are getting somewhere. There is no other way. There are people who are in the country, there are people who are looking for change. All they require is money for airtime. All they require is money just to get into a bus and go and meet other people. All they require is just a simple things. Just imagine giving up a meal to say this meal, in it is change. In this meal, there's pregnancy, and we deliver in 9 months. In this meal, I will make a difference, because this pain has been prolonged, and the people in government actually may not know the extent of their dysfunctionality, but we assume they know what we know, but we refuse to share what we know. If we shared facts, I don't think anyone will fight you, because facts themselves are stubborn and they have a narrative, and you can't change facts. But we tend to fight people. We tend to put names, and then it becomes a dispute with Mugabe. Then he turns around and says, but what are you saying about me? Even talk to me. I'm an elected president. My term has not ended. What are you saying we should do? Should I just walk out of State House and squat in your place? What is it that you want me to do? And he asks you, your actions. If you want me out, then you need the majority to do that. But I can't create a majority without being able to articulate why change is required. I may say, I don't like bond notes. They will say, but give us the alternative. But how can I give alternative when the morality, the thinking? Yesterday, Pastor Evans may know that people lost jobs in Shawan and Mashawa. Their lives were ruined. But the people who are protesting, if they started protesting then, when Makamba was put in prison, 7 months on remand, when Fundira, when Muderedi, when Chiangwa was put in prison. If we started then we'd have a culture of resistance. And it's like cancer, it spreads. But some people thought, no, it was Mutumbuka's problem. He bought a car, sold it for profit, and that was a crime. Until it comes to your doorstep, then you understand what it is. But if the people who have had the privilege of being victimized remain silent, then that silence is actually worse than the treatment they get. Some people say, but you guys deserve it. And I'm talking about property. The moment you say you deserve it, then tomorrow you're going to deserve it yourself. Instead of using all these examples to say this is unacceptable. But the version that President Mugabe has may not be the same version that we all think he has or ought to have. Because the system is managed. You can't have access to him. Imagine he thinks you're an enemy. And you became an enemy in 1980. It will mean that 37 years, the president is not your president. Can you imagine how devastating that is? You fought, yet you have no access. So this is the challenge we face, that we don't seem to know that an injury to one is an injury to all. Only yesterday, Vice President Mnangagwa thought, oh, Mujuru was what? Mujuru didn't get it. They went to Congress. Mujuru evaporated. They are going to Congress now, and whose name is on the sticker. It's no longer Mujuru. But if he had the principle to say, you accuse somebody of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's no evidence. The promise of independence was that this kind of barbaric behavior will never visit. But how many things have happened under the watch of the same people who today will say they are victims? So it's not so easy to deal with things when people think it's personal. So Mugabe becomes the custodian of everything that is wrong. But we, the people, what have we done to make it so obvious, so convenient, that anyone who acts in the name of the people will know that these actions, when you take the cumulative and aggregate of all these actions, you then say, no, no, no. We have crossed the line, the Mason line, which says, again, whenever any government shall be found inadequate or contrary to the purpose for which it was instituted, which is for common benefit, for protection and security of the people who create it. A majority of the community has the obligation, or to create the obligation, to reform that government, alter, or abolish it, not to elect it. There is no provision in Mason's narrative of rewarding that which is undeserving of the reward. And like George Washington said, there is scarcely any part of my conduct which may not hereafter be drawn into precedent, that anyone, any person of flesh, we must know he is living life the way you are living it, not knowing what the next second holds. And if you don't know the universe, why give somebody credit for pretending to know, or electing them, and then you expect them to know that which you are not capable of knowing? So the moment we fall into the trap that we are electing someone to run the government, to have the wisdom that we don't have, then we can never cure that problem. We can only cure it if we become literate about what power is and what power is not. Why power is not democratized, why some seem to have it and others don't have it. Then we are going somewhere. So we need to be able to reflect, introspect, and improve our knowledge of power. Because if we don't, there will always be bad people in government, because borrowed power is so seductive. You give someone a car to drive, they become a law unto themselves. You give someone a house to live in, they become a law unto themselves. So don't think that the people you elect, actually you owe them anything. In fact, they owe you. But the scale is tipped in their favor because you have elected to be ignorant. So can we have more sessions of this nature so that we can begin to open our minds about what government is and what it was never meant to be? What the actors in the name of government should and ought to do to protect or to live up to the Masonian principles: common benefit, protection, and what? And security. But not the security that we see. And Steve says it's okay with me. More conversation means more understanding. So as we wind up, I don't know whether you have benefited from this conversation. If so, please say just yes, so that we know that what we are doing is not in vain. And how many of you enjoy being part of a conversation that opens the mind, that unlocks the mind, so that we can begin to be honest to what the issues require us to be? So I'm waiting for your feedback. So big time mental benefits, pushing back the frontiers of apathy and the doubt and the fear that people are afraid. They don't even know what to say. If you were to meet President Mugabe right now and he's given you 5 minutes, what would you say to him? You ought to be able to say so without fighting. Just to say the purpose for which the government was established is no longer there. So your government, if we can call it that, it has ceased to be what it was meant to be. And if he is smart, he will ask you, why are you saying so? And you give him the reason. That is for him to pretend he has not heard you. But let us have these conversations so that we can begin to frame our arguments for change. Because any change, any motion requires causation. You need to think about it. Mugabe, why have you persecuted your people? That again, Steve, we persecute ourselves. One man is incapable of being dangerous. Even if he's evil, he needs the time which God has not given him. The time is in the real sense. It's in real time. Why does this evil person, if we choose to call him that, get the time to be evil? How come we associate everything that is bad with one person instead of looking at ourselves and say, what are we prepared to give up to secure the kind of change that we think we need? Mugabe, you were once a victim. Now you've tortured your people. Again, Steve, let's depersonalize. Let's have conversations about issues. What kind of government do you want? Let's not focus on the driver. Let's focus on the car that is going to give us passage from point A to point B. It's not him. You can shoot him today. The poverty will not escape. Smith is gone. All the greatest emperors of yesteryears, they came and went. They never cheated death. But after they're gone, what then happens? So let's not build the driver. When the driver is moved, the car may be stationary. If you're going to vote, don't vote him out. Vote for something. If he's not the person that you think should be a trustee or a servant of you, then please do what is necessary within the four corners of the law. If it's the car, they need a new driver. Again, the driver is not going to come from heaven. The people who vote, the demographics of what we're talking about are there for you to see. They're not going to change because we wish that they change. There are far too many people who are not engaged as we are engaged, and yet they have a vote. So our job is to make sure that we break this language into a language that people can understand, can relate to. And even if you vote, you must know what you're voting for. It requires education, because there are things that we have covered today other people were not aware of. And that's what progress is. That's what the same missionaries who took time, effort to train people, they didn't know they were training the revolutionaries. Because the moment you arm someone with knowledge, you can't take it back. You can't manage it. You can't control it. That is enlightenment. So I think we have 8 minutes to go. So is there anyone with interest? We may be boring you by talking about things you already know. Those who have benefited from this conversation, please do indicate. I always like the number 10. Because if I get 10 people, I know I can get a synagogue. So any feedback? No boredom, deep conversation. Yeah, what I'm asking is, are this conversation important so that we can schedule another time, so that those who are interested in it, we can agree on what time? Okay, Steve, number 1. So silence means democracy is at work. Yes, Abu Oliphant, I've been home. You may not be aware. I have been home, and I have had a conversation on the same issues I'm talking about, even with President Mugabe. I'm not afraid to speak my mind. So, Steve, yes, suggest another time. It's late out there. It's 12 midnight. What we want is just for us to get 10 people who are going to form the nucleus of this. So I have Steve, who said yes, and Abel. I think it's not about Mawere. Mawere may be dead tomorrow, then what? We shouldn't look for a messiah. Okay, Steve again. We see you and hear you. Anyone else interested? So which part are you going to play? Ibo, don't focus. I think the lesson we've learned. Don't focus on me. If I'm dead, Zimbabwe will still continue. So focus less on me than what you can do for yourself in the name of Zimbabwe, if that's what you choose. So let's not be this personality cult where we are trying to what? To build monsters around us. Okay. The proposal is Have you enjoyed the show? Has it added value to your life? If so, yes. Do you want a continuation? So, Bule, that is the proposal. Again, I've said that there is no leader. I draw your attention to what George Washington said. Again, not because I love the guy, he's dead. But let me take you to George Washington. He says, I walk on untrodden ground. That there is no experience, there is no resources that can overcome the will of the people. What is a leader? Let's have a conversation on what is a leader. Ebo, I think, let's reflect on this idea called leader. What kind of animal is that? Is it Mawere? What will make me a leader and not you? The moment you surrender something to a person, then you are going to pay the price yourself. It means you have already surrendered your sovereignty. So you are sovereign, Ebo. And you have the power of free will and the power to reason. And you control the universe from your actions and thoughts. So you are the deal, not me. Worry less about another person, what they are going to do, what they are not going to do. Worry about what you are able to do or to give up to secure the kind of order you want to see or to be part of. So my question remains, Bule and others, those who are interested in the topic, I know we can talk and talk, but we also have to, like anybody else, to listen to the dictates of nature, to rest so that we renew ourselves tomorrow and we fight another battle. All I'm asking is this of interest? I've said, Steve has given another topic. What is a leader? Not what is Mugabe, what is Changirai. They may not be leaders themselves, but we have forced them to think they are leaders. Now they begin to act the part. Now they're just movie actors. And we pay the price. So never give someone high-heeled shoes so that they can be taller than you. And when they're taller than you, you have given them the reason to be taller. And you pay the price. Because what they think, they will think they're thinking for you and on your behalf. And sometimes without your knowledge and consent, things will be done in your name, but not in your favor. So I got Steve. I don't seem to have interest in the. So you are the only one. I can't speak to one person. So I'm giving her, it's midnight here. So I'll give 5 minutes for those who are interested, and then we close. So I got Steve as number one. I got Steve. Okay, bullet number 2. After Mugabe, should Zimbabwe go the socialist route or neoliberalism? I think that's another good topic. What do you think? I think we can discuss that. Let it be another topic. Whether Zimbabwe itself should go anyway or remains neutral with no eyes, no ears, just becomes passive and allow the people of Zimbabwe to be the champions, the drivers of where they want to go. And I don't have any patience for socialists. I don't know what neoliberalism is. But what I do know is human beings are aspirational. No one wants to go back. No one wants to use the reverse gear. So I don't really know what those labels mean, but I've seen them being abused for political expediency. So Abel, if you know what a socialist is, tell me. Joy, welcome. You say, yes, you can speak to one person. What does that mean? Is Mugabe the ultimate problem of Zimbabwe? Okay. I think that's what we were talking about maybe earlier. Should we limit the mischief that has caused Zimbabwe to be where it is to one person? Oh, you said I was talking to one person? No, I was saying I can't retail to 1,500, then talk one person to each, answering the same questions that are common to all. And Ebo, if you're not sure, that's fine. You can find your own conversation that help you to get somewhere, because there is no messiah, there is no doctor of logic or common sense. And the common sense is inherent in you. What we're just doing is just sharing. Because, Joy, if I were to talk to 1,500, a person a day, it would take me, 5 years? Just talking to people. But if we have a common problem, then we can share the problem. Create a community where problems are shared, insights are shared, experiences are shared. Knowledge can also be shared. Mugabe is a symptom. If we don't identify the true issues, we'll be misled. You're right. Mugabe is just a football that can be kicked around. But actually, the real problem may actually be the people who are kicking the ball. So that's so Steve will just surprise people if something comes up, but there is an issue of leadership. But it looks like the apathy that we are talking about actually goes into the airwaves as well, into the cyberspace. So we have come to the end of the road, and Steve says the Zimbabweans are their own problem. I think human beings create their own problems. We create our own limitations, because sometimes our conversations don't go far because people expect whatever the narratives they have in their minds to be the universe. And when they don't get it, how many people have viewed this broadcast? I think that's Bule who is asking. Joy, you say we are a young country. I don't think we is a good description, because you are you, the country is a country. The country has no ambition to be old. I think we come and go, the country will remain. I should like to believe that we, the people, age. We, the people, are born and die. But the country does not suffer the same limitations of life. Bule, we are the people who have watched on Zimbabwe today is 1,928 so far, and on the other 201. So if you add the two, some democracies like US have set systems that live on Kanavanwafa. The founding fathers are dead, but I think you will agree that they never anticipated, and many never anticipated that Trump would be president, or even Barack Obama, that men like Barack Obama would be a president. But yes, what makes systems are people. And no system can exist independent of the people who want it to exist. So we always assume that systems have their own life. Yet the truth, in truth and fact, democracies are what people make them. And people always get the leaders they deserve, because it's up to them, it's really up to the people, who sometimes are apathetic, are fatalistic, are nihilistic, and are cynical, who are the very guarantors of those systems. So Zimbabwe will come and go, but characters, Zimbabwe will remain, but the characters will come and go, as they should. So on that note, anyway, it's good to see you again, Mr. Mawere. Please bring back the National Development Assembly. With that, I think we shall prevail. God bless. Saza is calling me. I have to go again soon. Thank you, Steve. Saga, what system do we need to put in place? We need human beings first, and the human beings will create the systems that serve them. And yes, we are now privileged to have National Development Assembly because the technology allows us to do so. So thank you very much for finding this useful, because that's only when we have a conversation can we think better and act better. So Joy, it's you and us to build communities where we put our own rules and then function within the framework that we would have set for ourselves. The people who are there, Joy, you say, what does that mean we need people? The people are there, but if you have a 37-year-old problem, you must accept that the missing dots may be us, not them. So we have to play our part. We have to show up for what we think is right. So it's not so much that the people don't exist. They are there. But sometimes to build a community of interest and then to secure the interest, to promote the interest, requires organization, not necessarily a political party. but people must be organized. Yeah, and I think you also say this is an awesome conversation. Thank you. The missing dot is the documents we have in place that allows for that to happen. 37-year rule. It's not even a rule. It's just a one man in government. He's a trustee. He's your servant. But sometimes the people who are supposed to be saved acquiesce and consent to being objects. And then when they are objectified, then they complain and say, why am I an object? If you are a human being, you must have the faculty to reason, the faculty of free will. And you must be a human being, because the human beings by nature, they have a gift of a mind. But how many people are using the mind to think before they act? So it's not always the case. Yeah, you say we need a change in legislation, and who is going to bring legislation? And you may think legislation has got legs and eyes and ears, but legislation is people. It's morality, it's political morality, eco-social morality, economic. So who is going to bring that change? What kind of legislation do you want to govern what? There is a constitution. It says one thing, but other people do the opposite. So let's build a culture of conversations. Let's build a culture where we can interrogate ideas, where we can have a battle of ideas, where we can have a rebellion of ideas. When people know better, then they can convert those ideas into structures, into real estate, into motorways, into infrastructure, into objects of value. So it's not just legislation sticking out. It's actually people choosing to say, no, this is our future. It's our common future. It's a shared future. Let me show up for my part in this common tent. Let me be in the melting pot of ideas, even if it means rebelling against the ideas. It is that rebellion that brings change. So on that score, we have done 2,000 people. They have seen what we have said. The video remains. The ideas are not unique. They are not foreign. They are really the ideas that come from people with who are keen and participate. Without participation, nothing can be done. Let's not agonize. Let's organize. Let's not reduce everything into politics as if politics is a reason why life exists. Politics is just one of many stages that people play in. There are many other stages that we can choose to prosecute the ideas that lift people up and out of where they are. There are people who lack the wisdom, the knowledge, because the people who are supposed to have it, they actually are not using it. And my observation is the alliance of the people's agenda appears to reflect this idea we are talking about. Would indeed, therefore, be an idea to join such a movement, create a greater impact. Now I'm saying is those who want to fight the election, they can fight. But let's find the resources to be able, the Alliance for the People's Agenda, you may find that they also have the same disease that they think a leader ought to be educated. A leader ought to be a superior person. There has to be a think tank. Whereas democracy has no provision for thinkers. There's a provision for people who vote, even emotionally, even vote without any thinking. They could be devoid of the sense that you think should be common. And let's celebrate that diversity. Let's not create this idea that you replace Mugabe with an intellectual, then you think you got an answer. You may find that democracy actually is about trustees. They say all power is by nature vested in the people and consequently derived from them. It's not based in a textbook. It's not based in experience. Because even George Washington was clear that I walk on untrodden ground. If a man of that stature could say that, then is Upper saying the same thing? Or they're saying, I'm a doctor of this, therefore I walk on a trodden ground. I have seen it before. I was a former minister of this. I was a former that. When that is irrelevant. So you must see where the departure points are. There are people who celebrate the equality that nature gives to all of us. Yet at the same time, they limit the circumference of equality and they become the intellectuals. They become the thinkers, which effectively means nullifying elections. Because it is common cause that the people who vote, not all of them are literate. And what is being suggested is that we convert a government into a university where professors come and lecture and pontificate when people actually are sovereign. A poor person today with no education can be a billionaire tomorrow. How do you explain that? Professors may not make ends meet, may be working for a pension, but a person with no education at all may actually be paying the pension. So, Bull, I hope I've clarified that, but we can have a conversation on it. What I'm suggesting is that if we can give up a meal and just send money, whether it's upper, whether it's no upper, but let's know that change is not costless. Freedom is not free. The moment we reduce freedom to tweets and to Facebook Live, then you always get the same Facebook Live conversation. So let's migrate from talking to being the actual agents of change, that you need to give up something to gain something. You need to give value to get value. So I hope we can reflect, introspect on creating value-centric associations where each one can play their part. There are some who just want to vote, but let's arm them with the reasons why they should not go left just because other people are going left. So thank you very much. I've done my bit, and it's only when we choose to share knowledge that it becomes something of value. It becomes property in the person who benefits from it. So if you have benefited from this knowledge exchange, that is for your benefit. That's a gift to you. For the purpose of organizations, what then would we label this idea? We label it a network of a forum, whatever it is, whatever you come up with. But let's give up something to give it life. Let's not talk, because talk is not giving up. It subtracts. So let's give up. So Joy, I hope you can give up a meal for change. So that the way it is. So, Bule, let's think about it. So tomorrow we talk about leadership, whether money itself can lead, resources can lead. And if we decide to put our mind to it, we can build the platform that allows the people on the ground to play their part in a meaningful and a dignified way. Because it's going to cost us anyway if we do nothing. So thank you.